wanted to walk to Crenshaw High. Man, talk about culture shock. Crenshaw was where I first got introduced to the gangs of L.A. Crenshaw was run by the Crips, though at the time you still had a few brims. That's the original name for the Bloods gang. Time magazine called it Fort Crenshaw. It was one of the most violent schools in the U.S. It was a closed campus. Once the bells rang, they locked the school down and you couldn't leave. Geographically, Crenshaw was closest to the Rolling 60s neighborhood, but we had guys from the Harlem 30s, from Hoover, from A-Tray gangsters. I wasn't a gangbanger. I never joined a set, never jumped in. I realized quickly that you don't have to join a gang. You just need to be cool with the leaders of the gang. I was friends with shot callers from the 60s, Harlem, from Hoover, and the ETGs. At Crenshaw, I was already known as a player. I didn't let anyone call me by my real name, Tracy. That would start fights. Niggas would say, Tracy, that's a bitch name. And shit would pop off. I always went by Trey or Crazy Trey. I moved out of my aunt's house and got my own apartment when I was 17. Since I was an orphan, my aunt was getting a Social Security check for $250 every month. And finally I said, look, give me the money. You don't want me here anyway, and I'm gone. I spent $100 a month renting a little apartment in the hood. I spent another $100 on food and had $50 left over to hustle with. When I was 18, I got my girlfriend pregnant. She was still in the 10th grade, and looking for a way to support my daughter, trying to do the responsible thing as a teen parent, I enlisted in the Army. I did my advanced individual training at Fort Benning and was stationed with the 25th Infantry at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. I spent 4 years out there with the Tropic Lightning outfit, firing rifles and grenade launchers, riding around in armored personnel carriers, learning to be all the fuck you can be, you know? After my discharge, when I got back to L.A., my friends had elevated their game. They'd gone from stealing car stereos to taking down jewelry stores and robbing banks. Most of my homies weren't down with the violence. They were players. They prided themselves on using finesse. At the time, they were doing what's known as trims. For a trim, the only thing you needed was a little nail file and a whole lot of game. Jewelry display cases have what's called a pop lock. If you know what you're doing, it's very easy to pick with a nail file. Crews that were trimming would walk into a jewelry store, usually two guys with a girl. The girl would say, "Can you please clean my jewelry?" A ring, a chain, it didn't matter. It was just a diversionary tactic to get the employee into the back room. One of the dudes would reach over the case, use the nail file, pop the lock, take the watches, chains, rings, whatever they could grab. The whole object with trimming was to get the jewelry without creating a fucking scene, meaning you could pop the lock, take the best pieces, close the case, and stroll out. No one in the store would even realize they'd been robbed until you were long gone. My homies like Nat the Cat had perfected the trim game by the time I came home from the Army. I brought other skills to the table. With my military training, I was a beast at logistics, planning getaways. I had a mean GTA game. Whenever anyone needed a hot car, a G-Ride, that was part of my expertise. I would get cars for everybody. I started diagramming licks with maps, teaching motherfuckers that the getaway is 100 times more important than anything that happens during the lick itself. The game is forever evolving, and while the finessers were still trimming, some of us decided to bring out the sledgehammers. I rhyme about this in my song, That's How I'm Living. Bash for the jewels, baby sledgehammers were the tools. I speak on this with hesitation, even though we're past the statute of limitations. Yeah, armed with only baby sledgehammers, we started the jewel bash era in L.A. Instead of picking the display case lock, we whip out the sledgehammer and smash the glass. filling bags with the loot